Hello, students! Today, we're going to dive into a really important topic, the conservation of our forests and wildlife resources. Let's get started and understand why this matters so much to every single one of us. So, here's a quick look at what we'll be covering today. First, we'll talk about our planet's rich web of life. Then, we'll see why conservation became so necessary. After that, we'll look at the laws put in place to protect nature, shining a spotlight on Project Tiger. And finally, we'll discuss where conservation is headed in the future. All right, let's begin with our first section, our planet's rich web. You see, before we can even talk about protecting something, we first have to appreciate just how special and interconnected it all is. You know, we share this planet with millions and millions of other living things, from bacteria so tiny you can't see them to massive trees and giant whales. And we humans, well, we're just one part of this huge complex web. We're not separate from it at all. We actually depend on it for our very survival, for the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. And there's a word for this incredible variety of life on Earth. We call it biodiversity. It's this beautiful mix of different plants, animals, and microorganisms all connected that makes our planet livable. Okay, so we've established how amazing our planet's biodiversity is. But, and this is a big but, it's in trouble. And that brings us to our next section, understanding exactly why conservation became so essential. The thing is, over time, we started seeing a really rapid and frankly a very worrying decline in our wildlife and our forests. This wasn't a small problem. It was becoming a real crisis. It was clear that we had to do something to protect our natural world before it was too late.
So that begs the question, right? Why do we really need to conserve our forests and wildlife? I want you to just take a moment and think about that. What do you think are the most important reasons?
Well, it really boils down to two key reasons. The first is to preserve our ecological diversity. Think of this as protecting the planet's basic life support systems, clean air, fresh water, and healthy soil. The second reason is to preserve genetic diversity. Now, this might sound a bit complex, but it's just about having a variety of species. For instance, in agriculture, having many different types of traditional crops is like a safety net. Some might resist certain diseases, others might survive in a drought. That variety is what genetic diversity is all about. So, with this crisis growing, the government knew it had to step in and take action. And that leads us to our next part, the laws that were created to protect nature, starting with a landmark one, the Indian Wildlife Protection Act of 1972. This law was a huge deal, and it had some very clear goals. First, it created a single, nationwide list of all protected species. Second, it banned the hunting of any species that was in danger. Third, it gave legal protection to the places where these animals live, their habitats. And finally, it put a stop to the buying and selling of wildlife. And you can see the results of this act right here. To protect animal habitats, the government set up national parks and wildlife sanctuaries all over the country. Take a look at these pictures from Kaziranga. These places became safe spaces, real havens where animals like the one-horned rhino and the deer you see here could live safely. Now, this law also paved the way for special projects to save specific animals, and we're going to spotlight the most famous one of all, Project Tiger. This will be a great case study for us to understand conservation in action. To really get why Project Tiger was so important, let's rewind a bit. Imagine, at the start of the 20th century, we had about 55,000 tigers in India. That's a huge, healthy number. But then, look at this. By 1973, that number had crashed, down to just 1,827. That's a shocking drop, isn't it? Our national animal was literally disappearing right before our eyes. So how did this happen? What went so terribly wrong to cause such a massive collapse in the tiger population? Well, it wasn't just one thing. It was a combination of problems. Poaching was a huge issue. Tigers were being hunted for their skins and bones. Their forest homes were also shrinking because of human activities. This meant there was less food for them to hunt, and the growing human population was putting more and more pressure on their habitats. You see, when a top predator like the tiger is in trouble, the whole forest's balance gets disturbed. So, with the situation looking so bleak, India launched Project Tiger in 1973. It became one of the most famous conservation projects in the entire world. And here's the key thing to remember. Project Tiger wasn't just about saving tigers. It was about saving the entire forest ecosystem where the tiger lives. So how did it work? A whole network of tiger reserves was created across the country. And you can see from this list, it was a massive national effort, from Corbett up in the north to the Sundarbans in the east, Bandhavgarh in the middle, and all the way down to Periyar in the south.
All right, so Project Tiger was a huge step forward. But our thinking about conservation has actually evolved quite a bit since then. And that brings us to our final section, where we'll look at the future of conservation.
See, in the beginning, a lot of the focus was on these big, famous animals like the tiger or the rhino. But our understanding has grown. We now know that you can't just save one animal in isolation. You have to protect the entire system, the biodiversity as a whole. This slide sums up that shift in thinking perfectly. We've moved from focusing only on a few large threatened species to looking at the entire picture. That means protecting everything, including the smaller insects and even the plants. And this isn't just an idea, it's actually in our laws now. Starting in the 1980s, hundreds of smaller creatures, like butterflies and beetles, were added to the protected list. And then in 1991, something really important happened. Plants were also given protection for the very first time. This shows a much more complete approach to conservation.
Now, this is a very important point I want you all to remember. Sometimes you might hear people say that protecting the environment gets in the way of development and progress, but that's not true. In fact, conservation is absolutely essential for a sustainable future. If we protect our natural resources now, we ensure we have them for the future. So, to wrap up, we've seen why protecting our forests and wildlife is so critical, and the steps India has taken. The main thing to take away is that a healthy environment is the foundation of everything else. In our next chapter, we're going to look at the important role that communities play in all this. But before we get to that, I want to leave you with a question to think about. How is a healthy environment connected to a healthy economy? We'll explore that next time. Thank you.